Good morning, everybody. Glad to have you here. Yes, I am still in my daughter Alex's bedroom, still with the surfboard behind me yet again, but I did kick her out of the room. Really excited about today's show, folks. Grab a cup of coffee. We're going to start here in a minute. As usual, let us know where you're at in the world. Sidrahar is already on. Good morning, Sidrahar in San Francisco. And Sidrahar already said he's a big fan of Nancy's work, so this should be fun. This is a fanboy episode for me, folks. Let's just go ahead and get it over with. I've been looking forward to doing this one for a while. And in all honesty, I'm going to change up the show a little bit. Normally, I do those 3 news stories, that happened in the past 24 hours and all that. Not today. I'm going to be selfish because I have a ton of questions that I want to ask our guests. So for once, I'm going to shake up the show and not do that. So with that, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 55th episode of FinTech Insider, the Breakfast Show US. I'm Sam Maule, Love Invest Managing Director in North America. I'll be your host for this show. We do this every day, folks, Monday through Fridays, and this is a way that we can keep the community going at 11FS, which is something that we love to do. We're thrilled to have a global audience. Please let us know in the comments. Jump in there. Let us know where you're at in the world. We'll definitely give you a shout out. And most importantly, share the link to this stream. Hit that share button. Click on the like buttons. Subscribe to 11FS on LinkedIn so you never miss a show. I'm going to go ahead and give out one of our research reports a shout out. So the latest research report we did with Plaid about how open finance will shape the industry. We did a show Wednesday with Adam Davis from our London office about this. Just click on the link that Bianca will put in the comments section, or you can go to bit.ly/open finance 2020. And like I said, we're going to skip the news stories and jump right into bringing in our guests. Today, we're incredibly thrilled to have Nancy Duarte from Duarte Inc. on today's show. We're going to talk about successful communication in the financial services industry and how storytelling is a powerful tool when speaking to your customers. Nancy, I am assuming that you're somewhere around Silicon Valley right now.
Yeah, I'm in Mountain View, the birthplace of the
birthplace.
Valley. Yeah.
And you were in Mountain View before Mountain View was cool. You moved there in 88, right? Or around that time frame?
Yeah.
From Mississippi. Congratulations.
Well, we went from, I was in Chico, California, then Mississippi, back to Chico, and then the Silicon Valley. So, yeah.
I'm not even going to ask why.
Yeah, yeah, don't.
It's a long story that I'm sure is a fascinating one. Here's how I came to know about you. And I'm sure that you've heard stories like this before multiple times. Back around 2007, 2008, I was working for a company based in the UK. I was living in York, England. And I was a director at the time, had people reporting to me, and my boss had asked me to go in and do a strategy document in PowerPoint, of course. So I threw some ideas down in bullet points on a single page, put zero effort into it, by the way, because I didn't like my boss, and sat down with them. And I remember this boss looking at me, this guy younger than me looked at me and he said, "You're better than this, right?" I went, "What?" And he goes, "Just, you're better than this." And I thought,
career-defining moment for you.
Well, in my mind, I thought,
"You child tell you that."
Yeah, I was like, "You jackass." And so I said to myself, I will never be told one of my presentations wasn't good after that. And so the next time I did something for him, man, I went out and studied. I looked at Presentation Zen. Yeah. I looked at everything online. It just so happened to find you. And I became known for my presentations, which then led to me becoming a keynote speaker, which then led to me going on the speaking circuit, which then led to me joining 11FS, where we're known on the media side in that. So you sparked my career from going from a cubicle to a stage. No, it's a true story. So,
well, you put the hard work in. So.
But you need those people out there, right? You need those that can spark ideas. To steal from one of your TED Talks. Why is storytelling so important?
Communicating in the structure of a story is powerful. So now that we can hook up fMRI machines up to the brain, we can see what's going on when a story is being told. And there's a few phenomena that are really, really fascinating. One of them is that all the sensory parts of the brain light up. They're on fire. And there's really no other communication medium that fires all the senses like that. And while the storyteller is talking, the story listeners listening, their brains are actually firing in the exact same order. And the other thing that happens is our critical voice is dampened down, and our mind is open to alternate realities when stories are being told. So all those things are just one reason why, if you frame your communication in the shape of a story, it's going to have more impact, because we're wired to process stories in the sensing parts of our brain.
I'm really fascinated by the origin story. I mean, I know I've read about it, right? You had moved to Silicon Valley. You had moved to Silicon Valley. Your husband was going to seminary. You guys discovered a Mac like back in '88, I think, or a little bit before that.
'88, yeah.
And so you kind of started the idea for this business. But how did you, if back in '85 when I graduated from high school, if I told my dad, "Hey, I'm going to be a storyteller," I would have got kicked out of the house. So how do you say this is what I'm going to do for a living?
Yeah, like everyone needs an origin story. Everyone needs a calling story. And what's interesting, we didn't set out. We would say it found us. So we dropped into the Silicon Valley right when the Mac came out, and real graphic designers thought it was stupid, right? So we were some of the first people to do technical illustration. So that's how we started. I picked up the phone and called and sold. And if you think about it, like when NASA was one of our first customers, they used to take black electrical tape and an X-Acto knife and plot charts by hand. And so we show up and we were kind of those young digital upstarts that we're your old boss, right? And we were just like, hey, we could do this on a computer. They're like, what, a computer? And so we won all kinds of work just saying we could take what they're doing so manually and do it digitally. And then, of course, we got it after we completely nailed doing the pictures and re-visualizing concepts. It was really natural to jump right into story and storytelling. So we actually started visual, then story, and now we do the speaker coaching. So it's a three-legged stool to present. You have the story, the visuals, and then how you deliver it. Those are the three components of a great talk.
So your husband initially had founded the company. I love this story I read in the New York Times. I think it was in 2008, where at the time you were pregnant with your second child, and the business isn't taking off yet. And this is what they said in the New York Times. And you can tell me, you looked at them and said, okay, this is a joke. That's it. You got on the phones, and within a week you won NASA, Apple, and Tandem Computers. Is that true?
Yeah. So it was actually
I love that.
2000. So it was '88, and then it was 1990 when I joined. That was the month my son was born, and I was so frustrated. I was so pregnant, so hormonal, and it was like that scene in Psycho, right, where the like knife in the. I would come home every night and just try to henpeck him. I'd be like, get a job, I was just so horrible. And then he's like, please, just read a Macworld magazine. I'm like, fine, I'll read it. I'm like, well, maybe this is a thing. And look, if I can sell it, you can keep it. If I can't sell it, you get a real job. So I'm like 7 months pregnant. I pick up the phone, bink, bink, bink. Like one afternoon, I'm like, and then I never went back to my real job. Poor thing, like within 2 years, like we worked through the clock till 2 a.m. We each got about a 4-hour sleep cycle because we would work till 2, get up. I was kind of the account strategy person. He would do the illustrations and slides and stuff like that. And he got carpal tunnel syndrome because he worked so hard. But that was how it started. I just kind of peddled his wares, and then he let me take it over.
And the reality is, especially in banking, especially in consulting, I am a consultant still, but I come from that world. There's a reason that term "death by PowerPoint" came out, right?
Yeah. PowerPoint is evil, right? That was the
yeah. Came out. And bullet points, aptly named. We've all sat through those, and then we saw this kind of resurgence. I think resurgence is the word I want to use, where it was, you can actually blend technology and communication and storytelling. We had the TED Talks that took off, and we saw that shift. Thank God. I remember when SlideShare first came out. I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. This is the greatest thing.
What we did is we kind of went back to the future. So before every user had PowerPoint, we had 35mm slides, and it was a tray that you were trained in, and they were beautiful. I remember the first time I saw a company presentation on a 35mm slide. I was like in the front row, and it was glistening. I just thought, this is the most glistening, beautiful business thing I've ever seen. And they were simple, they were clear, they were conceptual. And then everybody became users of PowerPoint and keynotes. And then it just went into a state of decay.
Yeah.
And then my organization and body of work brought it kind of back to the future in a way, right? Making it highly conceptual, highly visual, and just all glistening.
Well, and then, I mean, you know, obviously you had a ton of success, you know, especially with, you know, someone like Apple as a customer. And then
31 years.
Yeah. And then 2006 rolls along and you've got Al Gore and An Inconvenient Truth. So this is the first time, ladies and gentlemen, on the Breakfast Insider Show that I'm talking to somebody who has been involved with an Oscar-winning film. Because if you didn't know, An Inconvenient Truth, they actually won 2 Oscars. I think one for music and definitely Best Documentary in 2006 for that. And all the visuals that you see in there, all of the data points, that was Nancy and her team. What was that like working with Al Gore on that?
Well, so Apple referred him to us because when you're on the board of a company, you can't receive goods or services. So he came in with his actual 35 millimeter slide carousel from the 70s. Yeah, we scanned it in. He's like, this should be more multimedia. So what's interesting is we worked with him for 5 years, and before, and he went town to town to town, treating a groundswell. Just every single city hall that would have him, he would give this talk, So we refine it, change it, make it more regionally effective. And then when they called us and said, "Hey, we're gonna turn the movie into a slideshow," I was like, "Who's gonna go see a movie about slideshow?" If you do the rest of the visuals for free, and we'd already put in a lot of time. If you do it for free, we'll just have Duarte's name in every single press release. And I was like, no, pay us this time. You know, I was like, I don't know. That was like big business mistake number 1. And but they did. I mean, then it's in the credits, and he's been gracious. He would always put our logo at the end of his deck and say, "This is who did my deck," and stuff. So that was always cool. But yeah, number 1 business mistakes. It was $10,000 was what they were going to pay us to just tweak them and get them ready. We had to reframe them, change the background color for the movie. We're like, no, pay us.
Yeah, we all have those stories. Trust me. Yeah. It is interesting that you were involved in a film like that, because here we are in 2020 and we're still arguing whether science is real or not. It's amazing, and that's a whole nother show. But it's amazing that we're still there. I could recommend a couple more things you could do, maybe for Dr. Fauci or some others, to help convince the population to knock it off. A couple of great questions have already come in that I'm going to jump to, if that's okay, because it's amazing. So one is, I love
surprises.
Our first is for our own Bianca, who does a lot of our comms and marketing and communication. So I have to give her the shout out. She said, "All right, Nancy, we talk about the importance of storytelling so much at 11FS, but it's not easy to understand, especially for businesses that are rooted in more traditional communications. What's the one tip that helps take people's communications from good to great?"
I would say empathy. Like, you have to sit and think about, who is this for? How do they receive information? Because you can, especially in the financial industry, you could do a stand and deliver cinematic talk like what we were talking about, or maybe it's better to do a more dense slide doc. And we have templates up at slidedocs.com, but make it look more like a magazine spread, skimmable, super easy to figure out. And maybe it needs to circulate without the help of a presenter, and you need to put complete thoughts on a slide. So there's this spectrum of density where it could be, just beautiful stand and deliver, or make sure it just can circulate on its own without the help of a presenter. So write complete sentences in paragraphical form so people could really understand what you're doing, and that's process different information differently. And so know them, create it in a way that they receive information. And I think finance people tend to go very dense. So you're very proud, aren't we, of those charts we plotted, and you're very excited about the data sets you found, but your audience doesn't need to see every freaking thing. Like, they don't need to see that. Like, put it in an appendix or something, but make your narrative super clear. Like, make it really clear. Hey, here's what I found. Here's the action we need to take. Just make that part really clear. And if you want to look ripping smart, have a 200-page appendix, but call it an appendix. Don't clog it with the really important narrative. Could be 5 slides, could be 10 slides, but make that part really, really clear. And I think that would help everybody. It would help your audience, right? Yeah. Don't ever deliver a presentation you would not want to sit through. That's one of our That's one of the phrases we say all the time. And if you don't want to sit through your own presentation, you have a problem.
At 11FS, the way that we do it is we say, now next is the appendix and a little bit of a spleen. We actually put that all over the place. So we figure if you find that funny, we probably want to work with you. So, but I agree with you. I mean, it's that whole concept of know your audience, right? I mean, it's, and yet we've been saying that for decades, and yet people still don't do it. It's amazing to me that
it's a mindset. Yeah.
I agree. All right. Another great question. This one's from Sidharhar, who before we even started said he was a fanboy. Sidharhar's a founder out in Silicon Valley. Your work's been awesome, Nancy, inspiring and helpful, and I use your ideas in my presentations. While you've talked about presentations, can you also touch on credibility? Credibility amplifies our message. Steve Jobs' presentations were brilliant as such, but we need to make sure we have that and that comes across in our delivery. So how do you do that?
Yeah, you know, I kind of go to the rhetorical triangle a little bit, where it's analytical, emotional, and credibility, right? If you go too analytical, it lowers your credibility. Too emotional lowers your credibility. Your credibility is established the minute they see you. It's part of our fight or flight instinct, the amygdala part of the brain. We're processing. Am I safe? Someone just walked in the room. Am I safe? Are they a threat? And you just process them. So a first impression is really, really important. So if you're about to do a layoff, say, you wouldn't greet everyone at the door patting their backs. You wouldn't have balloons. You wouldn't be smiling. You know, you have to kind of set the tone. You have to be credible. So one of the first things you have to do to gain credibility is have common ground. So that's why the presentation form in my book, Resonate and TED Talk, starts off with what is. To gain credibility, you have to start by establishing, here's our current reality. Here's the state of the union. Here's how we're performing. And everyone's like, yeah, everything you're saying is true. Yeah, you know, and they're agreeing. And then you can introduce what the content is, or this new future you're proposing everyone move to, and you're trying to influence people toward. So all of those things are in service of, it's not making a good first impression. I love that he used the word credibility, because it's really about coming with the right presence, coming with the right dynamism, and showing up and modeling for the audience what you want them to feel when they when they're in the room right away. And you model that, and that makes you more credible than if there was a mismatch between your emotional tone and your content.
So another great question. This one's from Lee Wetherington. Nancy, I'm going to introduce you to Lee. So Lee is my southern brother. I grew up in Detroit, but I've lived in the South forever. Lee is from Valdosta, Georgia. Valdosta, Georgia, as we would say. I'm
Southern myself.
Yeah, well, Lee's got that accent. I love Lee. So I would say in the fintech and banking space, Lee and I are known as the storytellers. Lee comes across as the Southern, you know what I mean? And I love Lee. So everybody, if you need a keynote speaker, Lee Wetherington at Jack Henry. I love him. So Lee asks us, he says, great question, Sidharhar. Nancy, what do you say about the negative connotation of storyteller as a liar or a salesperson, or being slick with your presentation? So this whole concept of not being disingenuous, but really authentic.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. And one of the things we do is we say story. It's like story frameworks or story principles, and just so that they realize that we're not saying, oh, tell a tall tale during your financial analyst tour. That's not what we're saying. So sometimes I have to start conversations, mostly with more analytical roles, to say, look, I'm not talking fiction. I'm not talking fantasy or fairy tale. I'm talking for this. We have proof now. The Computational Story Lab too put 1,600 books into a computer, where the axis at the top was good fortune, the bottom axis was ill fortune, and then it was over time. And you could actually see that there's 6 story plots, and they undulate, they go up and down. And there's just so much evidence now that story is effective as a structure. And so I do tend to use the word story, or story frameworks, or story principles. And then when we are doing storytelling, we literally are making it really clear that there's this moment. Purpose of story is to bond. Purposes of story is to coach. The purpose of story is to make it clear why you're called to do something. Like there's a finite set of reasons why you would tell a story. And so there's also this personal narrative and corporate narrative everybody needs to have. So it's multi-layered if you really peel the onion back on what story is and how to use it as a tool. Is different than, you know, I'm gonna tell Hansel and Gretel. I mean, that's not what we're talking about. You could leverage truths and morals and lessons and structure from Hansel and Gretel. But you don't have to stand and deliver the story of Hansel and Gretel. That's not what we're talking about.
I'll tell you one I love. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does Alexa Harrison work for you? She is. Alexa,
she's all up in there, isn't she?
Yeah, I love this. So hey, Alexa.
She's awesome.
So this would be a insider prompt, but I love it because it's a great question. What are some tips for good virtual communications while working from home? And so Alexa, one, I had to call you out because my team does that constantly, and I love that your team is on and doing that. And two, lovely. Man, I agree, because doing this is my 55th show. We started this in April when COVID really kicked in, and now it's every day. And coming across authentic and interested in everything else in this medium, it's hard.
It's hard. You have to have really crisp sound bites. Like it's interesting because audio trumps visuals in a way, right? People will minimize the screen. They'll be doing email and then this kind of stuff happens. It's exciting. Can you hear me? My earbud fell out. Yeah, so you have to be super crisp. And when people are sitting there doing their email, they're waiting for something interesting to be said. And then they'll minimize their email, might even look to see, what's going on. So how you even structured the show, by going to chat, by going to me, by the nature of that, making it more conversations, a really powerful thing to do. And the other thing is the camera. Like I have nothing on my screen and I am looking at a little green dot this whole time. I have nothing else. I'm focused on this little dot. And I've trained myself now where my heart warms. Like when I look at that dot, I see people. I don't see technology. It takes work. It's taken a long time. I've been doing remote webinars and communication for a long, long time. And you have to come up and show up. You just have to show up differently and more human. And it was interesting. Stand and deliver presentations is a lot about what we do. And at first it was like, oh, you need to be very put together. And that's true. Like for a formal marketing webinar, you do. What's interesting is when COVID hit, it was like, whoa, that was kind of the wrong thing to do. People wanted to see you be real. They wanted to see your house. They wanted you to be conversational. They wanted you to be more let down, and they wanted you to lean in the camera and care. It was just a completely different season. I think we'll go back to this more formal webinar, presenting remotely, but virtual communications has changed forever. Like it's just changed forever.
Man, I'm glad you went there because I agree 100%. I think if anything, what I've seen over the past couple months, it's this embracing of authenticity that, hey, we all actually do have kids and dogs. And half the time there's a landline in our house. My wife still has a landline. I don't know why. Yeah, I have one. So yeah, we do too, but I didn't know we did. And that's a true story. I don't know what my home phone number is. I couldn't tell you, right? But like the phone rang during one of these, and everybody in the comment section started having a blast going, oh my God, Sam, you have a landline? And I couldn't find it. I kept looking around trying to kill the stupid phone. And people like that. Remember the BBC presenter who's
loved it. And that's normal now. Remember that spun up on the news. Oh my gosh, can you believe his kid walked in on him? And now it's just like, you could have kids. I think the news will be different. I don't think it has to be as slick. I think guests can join from where they're at. And I have a landline for emergency purposes. Like it's in my garage. I literally stuck it in just in case anything ever happened. I'm weird that way.
I do want to touch on this because I love to read. And we were talking about this right before you have books, all behind you. And I said, I learn a lot about people, about the books they have. One of the great questions. One of the great questions Tim Ferriss asks on his podcast is, what is the one book that you give as a gift or recommend? And I actually have 3. So the Horse, the Boy, the Fox, and the Mole is one. Tom Peters, the author, recommended that to me. I love that book. And Tom Peters also recommended All the Light You Cannot See, great fiction book, and Slideology. I have given that book away a million.
I need to update that one. That's awesome.
You've got so many. I think you got like 5, at least 5.
Yeah, I have more than that. Yeah. Slideology was my first one. That was my first book. I never thought I'd be an author until I finished it. And I wouldn't have finished it if Gore, who you mentioned, Gore Reynolds, is amazing. He just kept calling me he's the one who told me to write a book. He goes, I wrote a book. Yeah, he's like, I wrote a book, but I teach this. You should write a book because you do it at scale for the best brands in the world. And then he would call me every month and be like, how's it going? You want me to look at anything? Yeah, he's like, he was such a good friend through the whole process, or it never would have really happened.
I didn't realize that. So everybody, Gar Reynolds, probably still teaches in Japan, professor in Japan. He wrote Presentation Zen, and a great website, and that was one of the ones that I went to. I should have figured the two of you would know each other.
He Googled who did An Inconvenient Truth. The world wouldn't have known that we had. He already had a huge blog following, and then he did a blog post that we were the ones that did Inconvenient Truth. And I was so busy as a CEO. I Googled who does presentations, and his presentation blog, and his blog came up back then because we didn't have a presence. We were hidden. I just kind of always prefer to be hidden because it's a lot of work to not be hidden. And he sent me his manuscript and it's like, you could have every single thing I left on the cutting room floor because it's going to take a village to change how people present. And that's what started it.
There are so many quotes you've had over the years, but this one, because we only have like 2 minutes left, I want to ask you about, because you said this in an interview once, communicating in general is a make or break career thing. Yeah. I couldn't more. I think learning to become a storyteller, there's two things you have to have right now. You need data and the narrative around that data.
Yeah.
And when you marry the two together, you'll win. You might not have the greatest product, to be blunt, but guess what? If you can tell that story, I mean, VHS, beat beta, we all know these examples. I can do this over and over again. But when you said that, I mean, not to ask you to expound too much on that, but why is it so important for somebody in their career, especially a younger person who's coming up?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of power in the spoken word. If you think about, probably can't really think of a movement that didn't start with the spoken word. It's part of what happened with George Floyd. We heard his spoken word. That's what made such a difference. And so if you think about how the power of communicating, LinkedIn has done a skills gap analysis, and communication is the #1 skill gap by 2 million, like by a vast amount. And the analytical roles like data, engineering, and all that, the gap is even bigger. So the people who can communicate, even coming out of colleges, or the people even who have been taking our courses, is interesting. They're rising faster than their peers. They go into a high potential track, and they're advancing much quicker than others. And I just think it helps your marriage. My goodness, it helps your friendships. It helps you lead. It helps you have bond with others. It's just like, I think actually communication is true currency. To maybe be a provocateur for your audience, we can talk about money all we want, but in life, really, you're rich if you have community and friends. Like, nobody said, I wish I had more money when they died. They were like, I wish I told someone I loved them when they died. And so communicating will just make everyone's life richer, and it'll improve human flourishing. It will improve human flourishing.
So one of the, I'm going to end on this statement. So this is me trying to make you.
What are you going to
do? Blush and make your head even bigger than it is. It's a good thing your husband's out golfing right now. So the author Dan Pink, who I like quite a bit.
I love him.
I love Dan. He's a great writer. The book Drive, everybody. Another one. I should have said Drive. I give Drive away like crazy. But he said this. One of the most important things you can do is really try to take yourself and kind of write out your who you are as a person in a single sentence. Just narrow it down to just that single sentence. And can you do that? Can you actually take yourself and say, this is who I want to be, this is who I am trying to be. And so this is on your author profile on Amazon. Yeah. So this is the end of it. It says, Nancy has 3 grown children who walk in their destiny, a husband who has loved her for like forever, and 2 grandkids that take her breath away. Yeah. That's one sentence and to describe somebody. And that's a challenge I'll leave with everybody else. See if you can do that. Take the time, who is it you want to be? And notice in that sentence, nowhere did I talk about being the 5th largest woman-owned business in Silicon Valley, having incredible clients, because we're being named the best communicator in the world in 2017, et cetera. So anyways, Nancy, loved having you on. Where's the best place for people to learn more about you, and if they want to reach out to you to engage with you?
Yeah, so it's Duarte.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Nancy Duarte. And if anyone wants to hear from us, there's URL Duarte.com/Nancy, and you can sign up, see a bunch of free resources there for you guys.
Yeah, some of the best videos. Great. If you need free training, everybody, for your
We're
team,
putting a lot of free stuff out there right now.
it's out there. And yeah.
We're just generous experts. We're just dumping tons of free stuff for everyone so they could learn to communicate better.
It's the Khan Academy on on communications, folks. All right, that's it for this week. We ended the week on a high note, and we're going to start next week off on a high note. We've got the CEO of Galileo, Clay Wilkes, on, who's been making incredible moves. So as always, folks, don't hesitate to reach out to me. So Sam Maule on Twitter, Sam at 11FS, or at breakfastshow at 11fs.com. You have folks that you want to see come on the show, please let us know. Everyone have a great weekend. Thanks for being here.